Okay, so since the last time you seen me in the shop here, celebrating my 45th birthday, and I got a new toy here in the shop. And this is a Woodpecker's Poloni pocket rule. We're going to use this actually today on the workbench build and be able to lay out the bridle joints and the mortise and tenon joints in the workbench legs. Uh, any of this stuff can be done with a combination square or and a tape measure. You don't have to have the fancy tool that I got for my birthday. It's just something I really wanted for my birthday, and I got a chance to purchase it. So today I want to get a chance to play with it a little bit and share it with you and my thoughts on it. So one of the things that you're going to want to do is you're going to want to have one half of your leg. You're going to want to have your top rail and a spacer here. Now the spacer here is for the top of the leg, and it's going to allow us to take accurate measurements off of everything. And it's also going, when we go to glue the legs up, I'm going to actually set this over here. When we glue the legs up, it's going to prevent it from wreaking havoc. Now, one of the things you can do with the combination square, or like this one here, this Poloni rule does, is allows me to set the accurate width of it. And what I do is I set the thumb screw here after I feel, make sure this is nice and flush. And now this gives us the exact measurement that is to the top of our leg here. Now I've already laid out one of these legs here, and just kind of show you, you make the mark here, and you come here with the combination square and you make the mark. Now what I've done is I've marked an X on the waist side line. When we're cutting with the dado blade, we want to at least keep this blade, blade on the waist side of the line. If we need to, we can sneak up on it, but one of the things I really kind of want to do is I kind of want to leave a little bit of room for error here, so keeping the blade on this side. Now, one of the things I'm going to also do is I'm going to, while I'm marking the line here, I'm going to set this up right here, and that is to mark the vertical line. Now, this line will be eventually sanded off, but what happens is now we have an accurate reference. So when I'm actually cutting on the dado blade, I'm marking X there too as well. When we're cutting on the dado blade, I can actually reference the line that's going to be underneath and allows me to see the top of the tenon. Now, the next thing in the book here, I believe, and let me grab it, it's actually under all this stuff. I believe in the book, it calls for these here to be a 1/2 inch deep. And let me see here. On the link here. So, yes, the grooves are a 1/2 inch deep. So, what I want to do is I want to take this here. Once again, you can do this with a combination square. I just am playing with a new toy, and that is to set it for a 1/2 inch. Now, if you really want to get detailed about it, you could really mark this out and do this, but I just kind of want to just take the time to lay out the 1/2 inch height. So, as a reference line right there. Now, as you know, my rule is on the using tape measure and stuff. I don't really particularly care for it, but so what I want to do is to double back a reference. Since this is 1.5 inches, I want to make sure that that 1/2 inch is giving me 1 inch in depth, which it is. So what I'm doing now is going to set my height on my table saw blade to the dado blade, and right now in that, like I said, I have a 3/4 inch stack dado cutter. I'm going to use my miter gauge. If you have a newer radio arm saw that can handle a dado blade, so be it. It's actually kind of better to do it on the radio arm saw, as you can lay the workpiece flat and move the saw blade over it, but my radio arm saw is over 20 years old. I don't want to stress it out, so we're going to go ahead and start this here with the blade, get everything set up, and we're going to get this first part of the legs cut. Okay, so sitting here, one of the cool things about this ruler, and it's something that really has helped a whole lot today, is setting it up and referencing height. Now this has a height gauge built into it for saw blades, router bits, and one of the cool things about the ruler is that the stop here turns into a support for the base of it. Now one of the things I want to talk about is when you make your reference off of your table saw. anytime you're doing a dado or a blade set height on your table saw, you don't want to reference off of your insert. These inserts, they wear down, they wear out. They can be up to 30 seconds over even a 1/16 of an inch off. So what you want to do is you want to reference the height of the blade, which is right here. Saw's unplugged, by the way. And you want to reference off the height of this tooth, and you want to reference off of your table. The reason you want to reference off of your table is because this is the height that doesn't change. It's iron, it's flat, it's a dead reference for it. And of course, right now I've got this here tooth almost to the blade. And okay, so we now have it set at a 1/2 inch. So let's go ahead and get started with, I'm going to saw plug back in. We're going to go ahead and make our first couple of cuts. Okay, so before we get cutting, I want to talk about one of the things you're going to see me actually do. And I'm actually using my rip fence. I've set it to the line right here and using it with my gauge. Now, I've seen this done multiple times in the trades, including Norm Abram has done this. It's a perfectly safe thing to do when you're using a dado blade because you're not cutting all the way through the piece of wood. The reason you don't want to do this with the blade, a regular standard blade in, is because obviously it could trap between the fence and that and get kicked back. And we'll talk about that in a little bit different segment here of how to use a stop block with the rip fence and use it properly. But for this intents and purposes, the leg itself, it's not going to be a through cut, so we can use this to stop reference against the fence here, and we're going to start here and work our way out to the top of the leg. The reason we want to stop at the top of the leg is because instead of ending here, is that way your waist is always on this side. You have clearance for the chips and stuff to get out, and you don't have to worry about if you're going to make it, and you can make this first mark and make it referenced off of there. So we're going to go ahead and start the saw up, and we're going to get it started. Oh, might help if I turn the breaker on. Okay. Okay, might help if I actually turn the breaker on so the saw is actually on. Okay, so that's pretty much the gist of it. Stayed a little bit on the top side of our line here. Now we're going to take one of our rails and we're going to double check our measurement. And okay, if this here, being super cold here in the shop today, everything that metals in here is super cold. So we're going to mark off of our top of our rail here, top rail here, and now we're going to check our depth stop. As you can see, we just have a little bit left here to go. We're going to go ahead and sneak up on that final pass and finish it off. And there we go. Lock that fence down. And perfect, as you can see. So now when this top of the leg, or this half of the leg, meets with the top of the rail, as you can see, it is dead flush. There is no issue with the reference and measurements, and of course we're going to go ahead and lay out the bottom portion of it. Okay, so we're actually cutting the dado here for the lower rail for the mortise and tenon of the actual workbench leg. Now the book calls it for the leg to be 7 inches, or the bottom of the rail to be 7 inches from the bottom of the workbench leg. And that's just as simple as laying out 7 inches, making your mark, coming along here like I have already done, and making the 7-inch mark. Referencing back to earlier in the video when I showed you how to reference off of your top of your rail, which we know is 5 inches, but just to make sure, because some things happen with woodworking, that you should have approximately 12 inches from the top of the rail to here, which we do. So one of the things that you can do here is just with the regular roller, pull this out of your combination square if you don't have an 18-inch long one, and it's simple as marking from the bottom of the rail here to the top here and making a 5-inch pass. So this is actually 5 inches. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually groove this out. It's cut out to the same half inch that the top piece was done, and you kind of want to just take your time. This is something you don't want to rush, and you want to make it right. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get that cut out, and we'll be back. Okay, so now we got the bottom point cut out. As you can see, the part of the half of the leg is actually taking shape. Let me move this here so you guys can actually get a good look and actually can kind of talk about some of the stuff that I've actually done with this leg. So, like I said, our top rail and our bottom rail grooves are already cut out. This is going to form the mortises, and it's an open mortise on the other end for the top of the leg. Now, one of the things that you want to do is you want to take your time and make sure that everything is square. You want to make sure your combination or your combination gauge is actually square. Your miter gauge is actually square. Your table saw is square. And God knows this table saw hasn't had to tune up in about maybe 20 so years. It's just one of those things that we really haven't had a chance to do it. Maybe we'll do a video when we actually tune this up, put a new belt and stuff on it, but one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that this assembly here is as square as you can get it. And as you can see, this one here is perfectly square. And the reason being you want a perfectly square edge is when you glue this together, this is going to be what references it to be a square. So you want to make sure that your mortise walls are square, and you want to make sure that they are clean. Now, as you can see here with this, and let me grab something here. With this here, as you can see, you'll have these little bitty grooves here that were made by basically the corner of the table saw chipper blade. If this is something that really bothers you, you can go ahead and remove them. To tell you the honest truth, I would just leave them. You could go back in and clean them up with that and make it, but honestly, nobody's ever going to see it. And one of the things too is it adds a little bit of a channel for glue. If you wanted to glue something up, it adds a little bit more strength. We're going to be adding pins to this, making it a drawboard joinery, but it's something of personal preference. You're never going to see this here. All this is going to be put together. You're not going to see this here against the outside of the bench. So it just, like I said, it's just a matter of personal preference. And So we got 4 more of these to cut out, so, or 3 more actually to cut out to make a 4th one, and then we'll get around to making the top and bottom rails, the mortises for them. Okay, so now that we got our leg halves cut out and milled out, I'm going to kind of show you now what we were talking about. So once you take these legs and put the inside faces together, they actually form the actual mortise here and the mortise for the open bridle joint. Kind of what's really neat about this is you don't have to have a mortise or a drill press. You could actually do this like I did years ago with a circular saw and a speed square. Now, one of the things that you definitely want to check and make sure of is that these here match up and that these are actually 1 inch depth and width across. This way, when you make your tenons that go in this, then you know that it'll fit. Now, one of the things that I like to do when doing mortise and tenon work is I actually like to use a piece of cut off scrap that I have cut off of the actual rail itself. This gives you a good accurate reference. It doesn't allow you to tear up your workpiece and makes it a lot easier when you don't have to make the piece again just because you had a setting that was off. Now, one of the things that in the book that I called for that there's a big mistake, and if you follow the book's rules, make a note of this, it's extremely important. That in the book they call for to take a 1/2 inch off of either side, which will leave you with a 1/2 inch tendon. The problem with that is you have an inch long mortise. I found out that's the hard way. So what you want to do is you want to take that 1/2 inch and make it an actual 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to take my gauge here. I'm going to mark a 1/4 of an inch. Actually, I'll do it on this piece here because it's a little bit better than trying to cut through that knot. Another reason you do this, so you mark this here like this. Now, to go back and measure, now you have 1 inch. So it's actually a 1/4 of an inch. We're going to lower our dado cutter, and I'm going to wind up using this as a test sample to see how it works. And then once we do that, we'll set up the rest of our saw and get it ready to cut our tenons for the top and bottom rails. Okay, so as you can kind of see, we got the leg halves actually set in the clamps here for right now. There's no glue involved right now. I'm just doing a test fit. And with our mortise and tenon, you want a really nice firm fit, and then when you make that final pop, you want it to be able to lock in. Now on this scrap test piece here, as you can see, it actually gives a pretty good fit. One of the things that you want to do is when it's a nice dry fit, you want it to be able to once you tap it in, you want to be able to have it fit like that. When the glue comes in and fits into it, it makes it a perfect setting. So just make sure you do your scrap test piece, and as you can see here with the top piece as well, it allows it to be put in. That's a little bit too tight, but it's still one of those things. You can pare this down with the chisel. You can pare this down to make it fit. There's just final adjustments like with any other mortise and tenon, but you just basically want a nice, good fit like that. So that's what you're kind of trying to shoot for. So go ahead and get the rails, getting ready to cut them out, and then we'll be back. Okay, so before we get started on these actual rails, top and bottom rails here, one of the things that in the book it calls for is the rails to be, or the tenons to be 3 3/16 of an inch from the edge here. Now, what happens is the legs are actually 3 inches, so it leaves a little bit of a 3/16 of an inch stick out. This is for both front and back. Of course, as we mentioned in the earlier video, the first part of this video, these are 28 and 3/8 long. There's two different ones that you can easily get mixed up, the top and bottom rail. There's two different dado cuts that are actually used on the rail. Right now, we're going to work on the top rail right here, and that's going to give us the top rail of our workbench. And for each leg piece, it's one of these things. It's a rinse and repeat. So to build it, all you do is build it on the opposite side and just build it a mirrored image of the other side. So we're not going to do a part 2 showing the other side of this. I'm just going to go ahead and get these built and it's started to be assembled. But just wanted to kind of give you the heads up on, we're going to start with the top rail. This is for both sides of the workbenches, for both legs and for both leg sets. So let's get started on laying this out. So once again, I'm going to kind of be fair to everybody and not use my rule right now. And I'm going back to this here and I'm going to mark 3 and 3/16. Now, the reason I'm going back and check that with the ruler is, like I said, you want to be as accurate as you can. And as you can see from my ruler to here, it's 3 and 3/16, which is a good thing. Now, what you want to do is you want to take your combination square, or I'm using my speed square, you use combination square or whatever, and you want to mark the shoulder cuts for this here. Now, my short square is a little bit smaller than that, so I'll flip it over. And then you'll want to mark on this side here, and on this side here as well. This way you have the definite reference. And as I always say, measure twice. I say measure 3 times, 3 and 3/16. And according to our ruler here, it is 3 and 3/16. Now you're going to do this on both sides of the workbench. So I'm just going to go back and 3 and 3/16. Let's mark a square on that one. Mark the line. Mark the line here. And then double check our measurement. 3 and 3/16. Perfect. And then we're going to go back and we're going to mark this one here. Here. And then we're going to mark this one here. And double back and check our measurements again. Triple check again, because you want this to be as square and as smart as possible, or square and as easy as possible. And that's that. So one of the other things that on the book, while we're doing our layout, and since we're going to be laying out the my left hand, your right hand, if you're facing me, the bench's legs assembly. So in the book here, and I'm actually using this as a reference because it's easier to refer back to the plans than to turn around and tell you something wrong. The top rail has a 1.5 inch groove, 4 and 11/16 of an inch away from the thing. So what you want to do is you want to go mark off 4 and 11/16. So that is just right before 3/4 of an inch. For those who don't know it, your tape measure, 3/4 is 12/16. So 16th before that, and you'll want to mark it out. And with that, one of the cool things in the plan is they give you a reference point, which is 1.5 inches. And according to this, it should be 1.5 inches from the back of the rail, which it is. Now, marking this here reference point, you'll want to mark out 1.5 inches from this line. Now, one of the things, like I said, I use this here. This gives you a little bit of a more reference, but you want to go 1.5 inches. Now, this is for the top stretcher, and this is not the leg rail. This is actual workbench stretcher rail, and this will actually have a couple holes drilled in, some bolts put in. This is what makes the workbench come together. One of the things that you want to do is you also want to double check your measurements once again, you want to double check and triple check. So 4 11/16 this first line. You mark this out so you know which one to cut. And then you want to make sure that this is 1.5 inches from the top to from this line to this line. You want 1.5 inches. So that's basically how you lay it out. Now for this one here, one of the things I always tell people to do when you're doing something, if you got your saw cut up, make those cuts first. So we've already got our dado cutter here set up to cut the tenons to fit our legs. So instead of trying to make adjustments, we're going to go ahead and run with this. And then my second final cuts will be this rail here when I have to change the depth of it. And I believe this one here calls for it to be 1/4 inch deep. So we'll go back and reset our cutter blade up, and we'll make this cut as our last cut. So we'll be back. Okay. Okay, so now that we have our top rails cut out, I've got the rip fence here kind of set up for the tenons once again for the top of the grooves. But before we start making any more adjustments to our saws, I kind of decided I wanted to lay out the bottom rail. Now, once again, we're going to go back to our book. Now, the bottom rail is a little bit different than the top rail, is the fact that it has 2 grooves in it. And it's almost the same principle as before, and that is the rails here are a little bit different. Basically, the back part of it's the same thing as the top rail, and that is the top rail here is 4 1/16 inch, or 4 11/16 again. Excuse my French there. So it's 4 11/16. Seems from there. Mark it once again here. Mark it again. And like before, it's 1.5 inches wide groove. So marking it again. And 1.5 inches. And marking it this way. So I'll mark this here again so we know to cut. And then again, 3 3/16 inch from here, marking in this is our tenon cut. And the reason I decided against cutting out the grooves in both the top and bottom rail is I got this set up to do these tenons. Got a perfect fit. Don't mess with perfection. Always double check your measurements, as you can see here I've done. And so this is 4 11/16, 1.5 inches, which it works perfect. Now the other piece of the front rail is the second rail that holds a shelf, is actually, according to the book here, is 13 9/16 inch in. So it's 13 9/16. Once again, make a quick mark in it. Let's see here. There we go. There's a quick mark, and make that to the other side. Now that's also going to be 1.5 inches from the rail, which is right here. So I made that mark and make it a little bit more visible. Triple check the mark before I do it with the square, which is the 1.5 inches. And now we mark this. So, and we X this out. So this is the bottom rail. So basically you're going to have, and essentially, if you follow the directions, almost a 10-inch wide shelf. Now the shelf on this, I believe, the finished dimensions of the shelf is 12 inches, I believe. Let me check and see here and make sure before I tell you the wrong thing here. Yes, it's a 12 3/4 inch shelf. So basically this is 10 inches. You're going to use 3 2x6s to cover this, make a nice little shelf for this. We made actually jazz ours up a little bit once we get done, but I wanted to lay out this bottom rail here before we get anything too farther ahead. Let me grab the top rail here. As I grabbed it, as you can see, I've already cut the tenons for the top rail here, but as you can see, the top rail and the bottom rail actually match up. So this is for the top stretcher right here. The bottom rail is going to have 2 stretchers in it. So that's the difference where you can tell the top and from the bottom. So you always remember to want to mark it top rail, bottom rail. If you're old like me, you forget things and you'll wind up putting this in, gluing it in, drawboring it, and then you're going to have a big problem. So it's just easy to mark this. As you can see, everything's ready to go, and we're going to go ahead and finish cutting the tenons on this piece, and then we're going to be back and I'll cut the top rails and the bottom rail, and then we'll go ahead and glue these things up and call it a day. Okay, welcome back. So we got all our pieces cut out here. As you can see, this here with a piece of 2x6, just a piece of cut off scrap, just to make sure everything fits perfectly, has a nice tight fit. And of course, I did leave a little bit, 32nd of an inch play in this here for adjustments, especially when we're putting this together. We're definitely going to need a little bit of room for just to make sure everything's square, neat, and nice. The other thing that, just like with the shoulders on the tenons and the tenon walls, you want to make sure this is as square as possible. As you can see right here on this, it's square. Now this here, when this is all clamped together and put together, it's going to a square. It should reference, everything should glue up square. With this coming up, let me show you this here real quick before I finally wind up wrapping this up here for the day. So basically I have one of these here just kind of loosely clamped, and as you can see, this leg fits down into here. Let me loosen this clamp up just a tiny bit more, and as you can see, you want that nice tight even fit. And of course this is going to give me a little bit of fit, but as you can see how everything getting old and fighting things. This is one of the reasons I need a workbench. So as you can see on here, everything references up and becomes square. Now what's really neat is once we do this, this joint without the drawboard joiner is going to be super strong as it is, but we put a couple of dowels through it, it's never going to come back apart. One of the things I'm going to do is go ahead and glue these legs up, and as you can see, there's a little bit of a lip right here, and which brings me back to my final thing. Before you even start to build this workbench, one of the recommendations would be to get a block plane. Now they call for these here to be chamfered at a 45-degree angle, and I'll kind of show you how to do that. So one of the things you want to do is you want to work in, just taking the edge of the tenon off, but you want to work to your center. This way you don't wind up splitting it out and causing yourself a whole bunch of headaches. The second thing is to just work into the center again. As you can see, I'm doing this here. Just enough to knock the edge off. You don't have to make a perfect 45 or a perfect edge, just enough to knock the edge off. As you can see right there. The next one here that you're going to wind up doing is cutting here, going to the center, not going toward the edge, but just marking toward the center and doing this. And viola, as you can see, I just knocked the edges off. It's a nice 45-degree chamfer. I wouldn't recommend doing this with a machine because just setting up time-wise, you can do it with a block plane. Ironically, this is the same block plane that built my first workbench, so it's kind of something cool to have, still have, and still actually work on it. The other thing that you could do with a block plane is, per se, you got a tenon that's not fitting perfectly. It's a little bit large. Instead of trying to mill it down on the table saw and make an error, you can just take it a little bit like this and just mill off the edge and get it to make a tight fit. Now, when you see me struggling with that, that's because the fact is that's going to be a super tight fit. I'm going to tweak it, twinge it, and of course, make it fit a little bit better. But as you can see from the top rail here, the bottom rail, everything's going to line up, everything's going to go together. So I'm not going to bore you today with gluing this up. It's just basically the same thing as you're doing with every other woodworker that you see: clamps and glue. And as you know, I probably will run out of clamps, so I'm going to just glue one of the legs up today, glue one up later this week, and then work through the week gluing up the rest of the legs and milling the rest of the assemblies out here. And then we'll come back next episode and go ahead and make the assemblies together, and actually probably put this together the stretcher. Now I don't know when we're going to pick this back up again. Might be this Saturday, it might be next Saturday, it might be a couple from there, because we got a lot to do here in the shop. We of course got to move the radio arm saw, clean up this area here behind me, and get ready to adopt a new workbench. And with that, I'm going to say stay healthy, stay blessed, and I'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks for spending time here with the shop. Stay blessed.